Okay, let's start. Hi everybody, I'm Peter nneby. I'm a software developer at Xebia. I've been working with Xebia for the last 3 years, and the last couple of years I've been focusing more on the front-end development side. Particularly on the React side, that's kind of the thing that's driving me towards front-end development. And this is React Beyond Markup. So, we've all seen this logo. I think most of us know what React is now. It's kind of established. A bit of a hands up, how many people in here are doing React developing? Okay. Have we got a bit of a React Native community here? Okay. A couple. Okay. We're not really there yet with the React Native in France, I suppose. But it's very true that this learn once and write anywhere, you know, it kind of helps you. You learn React, and kind of the life cycle kind of carries over in a lot of different systems, so it's quite handy. And I love React, basically because it's kind of JavaScript centric, and I'm able to split my code into components and able to test them easily, and it's it's fantastic. It just makes development a lot easier when you do kind of a bit more complicated application development in the web and on the front end. I also love music. I'm a drummer. I used to play drums before I did software development, and so I thought it would be great to kind of incorporate a bit of music into the React side of things. But let's have a look first. A bit of music theory. We'll go quickly through this. There's maybe a few drummers in the crowd here, but basic notation. We got a kick drum, the snare, and the hi-hat. And here's the basic beat, kind of the first beat you learn. Maybe a little bit simpler, but when you start playing drums. So, anyone want to try and do the beat? Basically, the idea I had then is, why don't we use JSX to be able to compose music in React? So that was kind of the project, the idea that I started off this summer. And basically, we'll have React and music, and I'm great because that's two hearts. That's fantastic. Okay, so. What does that look like? So basically we've got the render that will return as a song component. We've got tracks, we've got bars, and then inside the bars we can kind of express our music step by step in a composable way, just like React composes really well things. And we need a bit of help from the browser, so we've got the Web Audio API. Today you can have basically the audio context. You can get it in two ways. This depends on which browser you're in. If you're in Firefox and Chrome, you get it through window audio context, and in Safari it's WebKit audio context, and you just create it with a new like that. And once you've got the audio context, you get access to a large number of different nodes, audio nodes. Some of them will play sound, some of them will transform the sound. Take an example, the gain node will actually set the volume of your output. So let's focus a bit more on the different audio nodes. We've got Oscillator Node. So this is basically what synthesizers are. The guys are doing a bit of electro. You get an oscillator, and you transform that sound, and you can do really nice kind of 80s sounds. But even in modern music, we use oscillators, and we transform it in synthesizers. It's quite nicely, put together these days. You don't have to actually transform the oscillator. We can get audio buffers as well, so wave files. It's kind of handy when you want to use a sample. The process is a little bit longer. We'll actually have to fetch. This was a bit of an asynchronous process in your browser. So you'll have to fetch the sound. You turn it into an array buffer, The array buffer then can be decoded into audio data, and once we've got the audio data, we can create a buffer source and connect it to our destination. So a bit more about the next slide. A bit more about audio routing. So basically, we can create all these nodes, and in the end, we'll connect each of them to each other until we arrive at the audio destination node, which is basically our speakers most of the time. So with that bit of an intro to React and music and the audio context, let's make some music, okay? So, I'll be switching between these mics. So the idea here, so basically we've got the a normal create React app project that's been created here. And well, I guess most of you guys know what it's like. It's quite a mature kind of bootstrap. If you want to start off a project, it's pretty good. I recommend it. And this is what the app JS of that looks like. This is going to be really annoying. So we'll start off. Let's make some changes to our app class just to make sure that things are working the way we expect. I'm going to make some modifications to the initial, and we'll get the logo. We don't need it. I'm going to say that. Yeah, let's make another change. Say welcome to. Can you guys hear me? Okay. Welcome to XebiCon'17. Okay, so that's the sound check of our create React app. So things are responding okay. So let's get on and create some sound. So the first thing I would like to try and get is a synthesizer. So let's imagine a component called synth. And so it's a React component called React. And what's that going to render? Well, it's just going to render, for now, it's going to render a paragraph called synth. Okay, just make sure that works. Okay, so we've got the synth is output in our browser. Moving on. So let's try and now play a sound. So component did mount, because we need to be on the client side when we do this. If you guys have done a bit of server rendering, you don't want to do stuff, browsery things in the before the component did mount. So we'll need an audio context. I'll try and write that. We're assuming we're in Chrome or Firefox. I'm not going to test whether we're in Safari. So once I've got my audio context, I can create an oscillator using the audio context. Oscillator. The oscillator, then, if you remember the diagram earlier on, can have a better look here. We need to connect it to our audio destination node. Okay. So let's do that. Audio connector, oscillator connect to audio context destination. Okay. So we're connected to the destination, and now we can play the sound. So all the nodes are started, so they have a function called start. And we'll give it an offset. Here we're going to say it's expressed in seconds, so an oscillator starts at 0. And we'll make it stop. Okay, half a second later. Let's see what it does. Great. So we've got sound. Now we can start playing a little bit with this. We can change the frequency of the oscillator. So by default it's 440 hertz, which is a C. Okay, we could double that to get an octave up. Okay, things are working so far. That's a little bit. It's not very helpful to work with frequencies, so we can take a bit of help from a library called a note parser, which provides us with a frequency function. So let's get that. Note parser. And now, in theory, we should be able to parse notes in a kind of more readable way. So say D4. Okay. An octave up. Cool. So now we've got the a synthesizer. Let's see if we can load a waveform. I would like to load I would like to have a kick drum to start with. Let's rename this to kick. Okay, we'll start from the point of the component. JSX kick. Okay, and this is where it gets a bit different. We're reusing some code. So here's, instead of creating an oscillator node, we'll have to create a source buffer. It's a buffer source. I'll keep mixing them up. I think it's a buffer source. Audio context. Create buffer source. And we'll now have to fetch the sound. I've prepared this so the kick drum is in my public folder of the project. When I fetch it, I'll get so this is the fetch API, which is available in most modern browsers. So I'll get a response, and I'll transform the response into an array buffer. Okay, we've got an array buffer which can be decoded into audio data. Array buffer. And then we've got audio data. And with this audio data, we'll have to assign it to our buffer source. This is getting audio data. And the buffer source, again, we'll have to connect it to our destination, the audio context destination. Destination. And then we can start the sound. Again, we'll start at an offset of 0. You'll understand later why we're talking about the start offset. That's an important bit. And we'll stop it half a second later again. Okay. Important. We need to render a kick here. Yes. So we managed to play a synthesizer and a kick drum through our navigator. At the moment, it doesn't look that great. Okay, we've got the kick drum just rendering in a paragraph. Okay. So I'm gonna, you know the chefs, how they kind of take things out of the oven and they kind of prepare the step. I'm gonna do that just now because you're gonna be bored watching me live code the whole thing. We're gonna get into step 2. Okay. There's not too many changes, but basically what I've done, you still hear me okay? I've extracted a buffer util because we're having to load, been able to load, in order to load sounds, we'll have to load them asynchronously. So if we do step by step in the app, well, first of all, the audio context, we don't want to recreate an audio context in every node, in every React component. So we'll pass the audio context through the child, through the context of React, and this is generally discouraged because the context is something that is kind of something that is an implementation thing that kind of is likely to disappear in the future in React code base. So, but here I think we'll be okay. So this gives us access in every component to the audio context, which is important. And once our component has mounted, we load sounds, which basically creates a dictionary. So we'll get buffers which have the kick drum available to it. And basically in our kick component, we can now play a buffer. We use the audio context. We've got the kick, and we've got a start time. For the moment, the start time is set to 0. Okay. Everyone with me so far? Okay. So it would be nice to be able to play sounds in a sequence. Okay. So at the moment, if I try to place these sounds, the kick drum in, say, 3 of them like that, that's just going to play. Everything starts at 0, so it's not going to be that great. So we're going to have to introduce a bit of a helper component here. So let's call it the song. Okay, we're composing a song, so let's call it song. And close it down like this. Up. Okay. The song component, what's it going to look like then? Song extends component. So first of all, I'd like to see. I would like to see I would like to be able to play the sounds like I did before. So we'll return this props children. So the 3 kicks, basically the children of this component. And that's still working okay. But what we want to do now is we want to create this delay, the start time. We want to try and calculate that. So we can take help from a React utility called React Children, which lets us map this props children. We'll pass it in the second argument. We pass it the callback function, which is basically going to give us a child. And for each child, what we want to do is we want to clone the element. Okay, we'll clone the child, and then we'll give it a start time. So this is the second argument is the props that we're going to add to this child element. Okay, and the child element for the moment is, well, the start time, sorry, is index. Okay, so now in theory we should be able to play the kick drum 3 times with a second in between. No. They're still all playing at the same time. You've spotted the error. Basically, the start time is hard coded to 0. Okay. I was It's getting scared there. Let's pick it up. In fact, we can do this, but we can do start time and next props. So we get the start time. So now, okay. So we got the kick drum playing 3 times in a row. Great. Just grabbing some water. So the next step, it will be interesting to actually change the tempo because 60 beats per minute, that's a bit, it doesn't really move. So let's introduce a tempo to our song component, which is here. Call it tempo, and let's call it 100. And then the only change we need to do here is we need to calculate the tempo, which is basically let's get the tempo out of our props. And then we take 60 divided by the tempo. It's going to give us the offset that we want, multiplied by the index. So the first one will obviously start at 0, the second one at 60 divided by 100. Okay, so that's playing a bit faster, cool. Let's have a look. So the next step, what's the next step? So basically what would be interesting now is to be able to play things a little bit more up-tempo. We're going to get a step forward. It's like when you save a game and when you play games. So we've got the tempo. What would be interesting now is to actually play this and a little bit more, have a little bit more control over the sound. At the moment we're playing quarter notes for those who know about music theory. So it's 3 quarter notes. I'd like to express things in 16th notes. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to introduce a props called notes per quarter. It's handy. At 4. So basically for each quarter we'll have 4 beats. And this should accelerate things a little bit. Again, I'm going to extract it from my props. Notes per quarter. And then again, we'll divide notes per quarter. Okay, so now we've got 16th notes. Now, I'm going to try and make this a little bit more interesting. Let's put in rests. A rest. So rests it's the rest that makes music. If everything was just playing once along, you wouldn't hear anything differently. So we need a rest, which basically stops a component from playing. And the rest component is just going to be simply rendering Okay, the rest component is not doing much at the moment. However, let's make use of the rest component. So I've got a bit of a beat here, which I've prepared now. Okay, that's a bit more interesting. So we've got a kick drum, 3/16 notes of rest, and then another 3/16 notes of rest, and the kick drum. And this is what it sounds like. Okay, so now we've got quite a few ingredients here to actually make music. There's something more missing here, is the fact being able to play sounds in parallel. So in order to play sounds in parallel, we'll have to introduce a component called track. So for you guys who've been working with music sequencers, we need tracks, okay? So each track will be able to play music and sounds simultaneously.
So I'll put a track name, kick. Okay, that's our kick. Track name. And let's fix the indentation. And we'll make a second. Well, let's make that work first. We've got the track. And all we need to do now is the track component is we're going to borrow from the song component because it's pretty similar. We'll have to pass on the props from our song through our tracks to our sound components. So basically the code is pretty similar. In the return, we're going to let the track. I'm going to let the track do this calculation. Okay, I would have to grab this as well. Tack. And this component, instead of calculating the start time, it will just pass on its props. And we'll do this little trick with this structuration. We don't want the children. And props without children, we get it like that. There's props. And here, instead of passing on the start time, we'll pass props without children. Okay. Okay, so that's still playing okay. And now let's introduce the a second track, which is going to be a snare drum. The snare drum. Don't worry, I've prepared a bit of code here. Again, I'm not going to type each and every line of this. Okay. So it's basically just the snare on the 2 and the 4. Basics. Okay. So we don't have the snare component. Okay. Again, I've prepared that. We can import it. It's pretty similar to the kick component. It's not that interesting. An additional thing to do is in our load sounds, we'll have to also load the snare to make it available to our components. Okay, I don't know if it's case sensitive here. Okay, that's not working because I don't have the snare. I'm in the wrong step. Okay, let's move on to step 4. Okay, that's where I wanted to write this stuff. Okay, so we're actually great. We're actually so yeah, you get the idea. So we've got a track, a kick track, and a snare track. Okay, I think that's a bit enough of coding. I guess you guys must be wondering how far is this going to go? We're going to do synthesizers. We're going to do everything by hand. Let's take this one step forward. At the moment, we've got tracks, and but we're unable to kind of repeat this. So repeat the beats that we're trying to do. So in terms of composition, it's not that great. We're going to be writing a lot of code in the same component. So what we'll introduce is we're going to introduce bars and sections. Show what that looks like. Okay, it looks the same, but it's the same sound. But now we're broken things into sections and bars. Okay. So so this will allow us to compose music a little bit more. We can kind of extract components that do sound a little bit like similar beats that we want to repeat. I'll give you an idea. Just to give you an idea. So here's the kind of complete song. I'll take a bit of time to explain. So basically, we've got the tempo passing through. We've got notes per quarter, which is allowing us to express things in 16th notes. So we've got the rest components to be able to have breaks in our music. And then I've broken things into, I've got a synth line, I've got 4 bars rest. Well, let's have a look at the synth line, which is another React component which composes our kind of synth sound, or the synth track. And as you can see, this is quite a lot of JSX, but we can compact it into a synth line component, and then when I want to repeat it, I can just repeat it twice here. Similarly with 4 bars rest. Again, let's just do in rest for 4 bars. Very interesting. And then the synth line comes back twice. We haven't talked much about the bass. I've been spending quite a lot of time trying to figure out how to make these oscillators sound nice. So hopefully we can have a look at the what it looks like. So here's our bar, which it's not that one. It's this one, the bass line. So I've done a Moog bass component, which is, again, to give you an idea of what it looks like. We'll have to, we've taken the audio context. Earlier on you saw we created an oscillator. You'll see it a bit later on here. But we'll use a gain node to control the volume. And this is getting rather complicated. There's a lot of trial and error to get the right sound. And I think the guys, people who have done electro and who are composing their own synthesizers, they know it takes a lot of time to kind of turn the different knobs to get the right sound. And here we'll get the we're able to connect all these components together, like we saw earlier on. We're connecting the different nodes together. Here I'm turning the oscillator into type sawtooth. I mean, there's a few different types of oscillators. I'm detuning it to create a little bit of an 80s sound. And then I've got a second oscillator which is detuned at 10. So we're creating a bit of a chorus between the different oscillators. And I'll start the 2 of them at the same time. And the start time is calculated from our app through the song, the tempo, notes per quarter, sections, bars, and then finally we get into the component with the start time, which is kind of taking into account all the offsets of the different components. Pretty complicated, but we've got the building blocks now to make music. And then we stop the oscillator at the stop at the finish time. So, do you guys want to hear what this sounds like? Okay, let's start this thing up. That's not...
Thank you.